Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is September 11th. I didn't realize that. 2019. Wow. And today we are very excited and honored to have our interviewee. Today we're going to be interviewing Marlena Smith. Marlena, her parents joined the Mormon Church as black members after the 1978 priesthood ban was lifted within Mormonism, and raised their children in the church. Eventually, they moved to Utah in the early 80s, I'm going to say. And Marlena was born in Provo, Utah, in 1989. Marlena was raised again as a devout Mormon here in Utah in kind of the Lindon and Pleasant Grove areas. She, as far as she and her family knew, they were the only family of color, let's say, in their ward and stake. Maybe only a few kind of black people in the entire high school kind of thing. And Marlena was really, I just felt like it. And I think Marlena was also interested in kind of telling a unique story, which is, what's it like to grow up as one of the only black people in the entire city you live in Utah as a Mormon. And that's a story we've never really told on Mormon Stories Podcast. We've interviewed Juliana Villegas Haas, who was born in Belgium and was a Mormon in Belgium as a black Mormon. We just interviewed Spencer Nugent. We've interviewed Darren Smith, again, who grew up outside of Utah, and also others. But this is a unique story that hasn't been told. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And Marlena, we're just super excited to have you on Mormon Stories Podcast, and we're honored that you would be willing to share your unique story with us.
Thank you. Yeah.
So let's tell us. I tried to kind of touch on this, but tell us why you wanted to tell your story.
I really want to tell my story is because when I was going through my faith crisis, I just couldn't find a narrative there were things I could relate with, but I just really wanted to find someone who knew exactly what it was like for me growing up in Utah, being a black member, being born and raised here, what that would be like. And I just didn't find it. And I felt like I've had other friends who'd left who we've had the same story. I'm grateful for that because I was able to lean on them. But I feel like there's other people who could really relate to me and also learn too. Because every time I tell my story, especially even to people who've left the church who are not black, they're always surprised and they're always like, oh, I never thought about that. And so that's another reason why I want to share my story.
Yeah. It's really important when you are going through a faith crisis or you've been through one to be able to find people you can connect and relate to.
For sure.
And I'm so grateful because there are many people like you.
Yeah.
But you don't want to just go up to Mormon Stories and see a bunch of white people or other people not like you and say, well, where's someone who I can share an experience with?
Yeah.
So we're hoping that people come out of the woodworks to me and to you to say, hey, I connect with this story. And thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. And I am so grateful even to everyone else who's shared it. It also has really helped me as well. So I felt like I could also do the same.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start where we always start. Okay. Tell us about your parents' journeys, what you know about their ancestry.
Yeah.
Clearly they weren't, normally we have the pioneer Mormon kind of stories. Yeah. Your parents probably didn't have that since they're converts.
Definitely not.
And we're just dying to know, why would any black person join Mormonism before or after 1978?
Yeah.
So let's start with whatever backstory you want to share about your parents.
Yeah. So my parents met in high school. My mom was raised...
What state was this?
Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My parents actually met in high school, and my mom was Catholic. My parents' story is kind of crazy. But I feel like a lot of African Americans can relate to this because it wasn't too far off before slavery. And when you think of that, it's like, oh, okay. So I don't want to share too much of my mom's story because she actually just barely told me what happened to her as a child. And it's kind of crazy. But I will share that she told me too, when she was younger, her little sister thought that she was her mother because, and they're only 2 years apart, So when her sister was like 2 and she was 4, she was taking care of my little sister because my grandmother was not fit to basically raise her. And she was actually, she was fine but one time she got gang raped actually. And after that went through a schizophrenia and, just kind of a mental breakdown and wasn't able to take care. There's other things that have happened. It's crazy, but she couldn't really take care of my mom and her other siblings. And my mom had, 3 sisters, two or 3 brothers. I can't remember exactly. And basically was raised by, and forgive me for, I might get this wrong a little bit, her aunt, but then also, but it was crazy because they didn't really take care of my mom. Like they were malnourished. There was a lot of crazy things that have happened. But my mom was able to survive that and eventually was able to be cared for by some other family who took care of them, and she was in a much healthier situation after that. And so, raised Catholic, and she met my dad at high school, and they got together.
In Omaha.
Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay.
Got together.
So your mom had a tough upbringing.
Yes.
What about your dad?
My dad did too, definitely. My dad, it's not necessarily as crazy as my mom's story. My dad, it's interesting because, actually not too bad. His mother actually went to college, which is not very common for Black people at that time. And there's some speculation that actually my grandmother, because she was pretty light-skinned, that her father was a white man. And my father remembers going to this rich white man's house often, and he would take care of things, but nothing was said because back then, it wasn't really a good thing. And so he didn't necessarily know who his grandfather was, but kind of had speculations. And so, and then I feel like my parents were kind of like, my dad was more, how would you say, in a more, forgive me, I'm trying to think of the word, in a better environment than my mom did, but though at the same time, they were still not the greatest. I mean, it's hard to grow up Black in Utah during those times.
It's hard to grow up Black in America, especially in the 60s and 70s.
Yes, so you can imagine.
Yeah. So whether it's the Jim Crow laws or the civil rights movement or oppression or just systemic racism on every level, wherever you go.
Yes.
And then all the multi-generational trauma.
For sure.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
And it still is. And so that's the environment your parents grew up in.
Yeah, for sure.
So what brought your parents to Mormonism of all things?
Yeah.
Right? Especially after the priesthood ban was lifted.
Yeah, so my dad was in the Air Force, and they were in Germany, and they met some missionaries. And that's where it all began.
And you're thinking late 70s, early 80s?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's where it all began. And
did they have kids at that time?
Yeah, I had 2 brothers, a brother Marvell, and then my brother Jason. They were 2 years apart.
And has your dad ever told you the story of like his conversion, of like what the family was like, what the marriage was like, what they were feeling, and what made them, I don't want to say, some would say vulnerable, or what made them interested or ready or, golden for the missionaries? Yeah,
my dad was always kind of looking for something, like he was always kind of like into spiritual things.
Was he raised religious? I don't know if you talked about that.
He was like, I believe Baptist, but not really. Like he was like, my grandmother was said that she could, that she was like kind of psychic. So it was kind of like the spiritual that was kind of there. And my dad was kind of looking for something. And from what I remember, he felt that there was just something different about the LDS church compared to other religions. And I think that's what drew him in, and my mom as well.
So something about it.
Yeah, something about it. I think if I can remember correctly, and I could get this wrong, but they could tell that there was something different about the people as far as the
Yeah.
treatment that they were getting at that time.
Do you know, was it in Berlin? Do you know what
I
city?
think so.
Or,
I think so.
okay.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, this is just for those who aren't Mormon, it's just like these Mormon wards, the families just all seem clean cut and strong and traditional, and people seem very happy and people seem very healthy and they're very friendly and they're super excited whenever someone's interested. And so you just get, number one, it's just super attractive.
Yeah.
It's like, I want a family like that. I want a family like the Osmonds, Who knows what's going on behind the scenes with the Osmonds, but like, they look amazing and everybody seems super happy and healthy. And I want a family like that. And these people just are embracing us open arms. I'm guessing that is probably what your parents
for sure.
experienced in that Germany ward or branch.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So they joined. Have you ever talked to your parents about whether they knew about the church's history in terms of race and whether that factored in to their decision at all? Made it harder, not harder?
I think they did know, but I feel like there's not a lot of other, I mean, granted, like it is huge, but there were other religions still teaching about Curse of Cain. And so it wasn't necessarily like, my mom being Catholic, she, I'm sure she was also used to some of the racism within Catholicism. And so I feel like they kind of knew, but didn't exactly know. Like they didn't know exactly what was going on, if that makes sense.
I remember talking to, I think it was Sean Carter, but it was probably others who I've interviewed that they share the perspective that a white person who doesn't believe in Mormonism anymore would say, why would any black person ever join the church? Because the church has a racist past. And I've heard people say to me, what church doesn't have a racist past? If you're going to be a black person in America, then, and you're going to hold a criteria, I can't join this church if it has a racist past, you don't ever join a church.
Yeah.
And so you kind of just have to lower the bar across the board and just say, what can this offer me now?
Yeah.
Because I need or want support now.
Yes.
And I don't have the luxury of like picking and choosing.
It's true, yeah.
I don't mean to be glib or even tell you your experience.
No, but you're like what you're saying is true. A lot of people don't recognize that. I mean, even when it comes to the image of Christ, when it comes to other things, it's like we're used to not being represented, And so it's something, like you said, we kind of just, if we don't think about it, it can be easy just to be like, oh, okay, well,
what else
we're kind of used to it, but obviously it's not right, but yeah.
Yeah. So they were more concerned about how it would contribute to their lives positively at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my dad was looking for something and he this was different. People were, for what they felt, were seeming genuine and caring. And my dad was very much into that. And so I think that's where, and my mom too. And I think that's where it began.
And they were probably searching for spirituality and meaning and purpose and identity and belonging and all those things that religions provide.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense for what joining the church did to your family, like in those first 5-10 years?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was a younger kid, I have really fond memories as a child before I recognized, when I was starting to realize before I realized that I was being treated differently. I have fond memories because it was safe, people knew who we were, we were in a lot of like I was saying, we're in I can't remember what page, but we're in my family's in the spiritual, revelation of preach my gospel. We're praying. We were doing all these pictures.
Photo ops.
We were kind of I have some fond memories when I was younger.
So the church is probably excited that your family converted because there probably weren't a lot of families of color converting.
Yeah, especially, I mean, we weren't what a lot of people who've never met, stereotypically, where some people assume what Black people are, we weren't necessarily what they thought.
How are you different? How was your family
different? Well, and I have to say stereotypically because it was frustrating when people would just assume that, I'd had people be like, oh, you speak so eloquently, or you sound white. I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean I speak, just like a, speak well. You know,
Or the
I'm human.
other people of color don't speak well.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Because in not understanding Ebonics and you know what it means when you live around other people, you sound like people you live around. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, I totally forgot what you're asking.
No, so the church was excited that your family joined.
Yes.
They used you guys for a lot of.
Yeah, they used us. We were in a lot of like church videos. We were in a lot of like I forget. There was like this magazine about family magazine for like family home evening. I can't
like the manual, family home evening manual, or
I think so. Well, we were in like just a lot
lots of stuff.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah,
they used us a lot.
And how would that feel? How does that feel to like have the church like super excited to take your photo and put you in their publications?
Yeah, I mean, I was like 3 or 4 or 5, so like when I was younger, I was like, this is fun, you know, like I just thought it was great.
It's got to make you feel special.
Yeah, it did. It did make me feel special until I understood exactly.
So later there was a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, but what about like, did your parents seem to get happier? Did your family seem to get along better once? Well, I guess you were born years after they joined.
Yeah, it was hard for me to say because for me it was all I knew, and when I was younger, life seemed great. My family, we would go to church. You know, people knew who we were.
Why were you born in Provo? What was going on with your family when you were born?
My dad actually went to BYU.
Okay.
Yeah, they recruited him. He was in the track team.
After Air Force?
After Air Force, he came. After Air Force, they actually moved to California, and then they moved to Utah, and he went to BYU, and he was on the track team. Actually, his record's still on the board. He got.
Wait a minute! You were born in '89?
Yeah, '89.
So he would have been at BYU in the late '80s.
Late '80s. But he left BYU before I was. Before I was born.
Okay. So I was there in the late '80s.
Oh,
so
really? Maybe you guys didn't cross that? I mean, come on. There's how many black people at BYU?
And my wife Margie ran track and cross country. So
maybe you guys.
I'll have to ask her.
I'm sure.
So he has a record that still stands.
It still stands.
Because that was they have had a good track and cross country teams historically.
Yeah. He was a triple jumper, and a long jumper, and I believe his triple jump record is still up there.
And his name is Joe Smith.
Joe Smith.
But not named after Joseph Smith.
No. I can't believe how many times I would tell people that and they're like, no way. He can't be named that. No. It's very common, actually. Joseph and Smith, you know.
Yeah.
It's common.
It is common. So you were born in Provo while your dad was at BYU. Was your mom studying at BYU? My
mom, no, she wasn't. She was taking care of the kids. But then I wasn't born yet when they were at BYU. So I have, they had 4 kids. They had my 4 older brothers before I was born.
And do you have a sense for what their time at BYU was like? Did they remember it with fondness?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was... I think they I know my dad really liked the track, but they don't talk too much about it. So I think they met a lot of friends. They created a community. My mom, I think they lived in Wymount Terrace back in the day. And my mom, just raised the kids while my dad was at school.
Okay.
Yeah, she didn't go at that time.
And so how many kids total?
So 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of kids.
It is. But it's what you're supposed to do when you're a Mormon.
Yeah. Okay, so where did your family go from there?
So from there, my dad got a job at, what is that? It's in Provo and New Skin. He worked at New Skin. Worked at New Skin. They moved to Lindon, Utah. We had this house in Lindon, Utah, and so my dad was working.
That's
and my mom was taking care of us.
North of Provo, right?
Yes.
That's where Ty Detmer was baptized.
Okay.
He was a football player when I was at BYU, so that's why I remember Lindon.
Yeah.
Kind of near Pleasant Grove.
Yeah,
little
right
south
next to it.
A little south of
Lindon's
Pleasant Grove.
pretty small, so yeah.
It was right by Geneva Steel at the time, which has been removed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so Lindon, and that's where you kind of were raised?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. How many families of color were in your neighborhood?
None. I mean, none. There were some kids that were adopted into white families, but they still weren't in the neighborhood. But that was as far as maybe in another city, like maybe in Pleasant Grove or Orem. That was what was going on.
Now, none of us can imagine what that would be like. I
Yeah.
mean, or few of us.
Yeah.
Some would say no big deal. Some would say, wow, that would be awful. Like, what was that like? How did you
Yeah.
experience it as a kid?
Yeah, as a kid, like we were always outside playing. We had a lot of friends, but it wasn't until people started pointing out that I was different that it started to be like, oh, like obviously I'm black, but I didn't know I was black until someone told me I was black. Does that make sense? I just thought I was Marlena, and then it was like this differentiation, going on.
Do you remember kind of an age where it started to occur to you that you were black?
Yeah, like around 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the kids were nice to you?
Yeah, they were nice,
You
but
had friends?
they were nice, but at the same time, yeah, curious. It was hard, like I remember like crazy things, like people, they would be like really surprised that the palms of my hand wasn't also brown. Things like that. There were comments that would happen. I would have my hair braided and kids would always touch my hair, or even when my hair was, natural, or they would be like, oh, it feels like a cloud. And like, at the time I didn't realize, it was uncomfortable, but I just kind of went with it because I really wanted to fit in with everybody. Everyone else was I wanted them to be my friend, and so I kind of just went with it, But looking back, it was hard because it was like I never felt like I could fit in. I always was singled out. I could never be, just like with everyone else, And I think one of the hardest things for me when people don't recognize is like when it's Black History Month, it's the worst month for me because
In
it's
Utah.
because it was basically, it felt like, let's look at Marlena month kind of thing, and I'm like getting emotional. Like, it's hard. Like they would read books and it would have like the N-word and, kids would read it and then they'd look right at me, and it's just like really uncomfortable. And I just felt like my experience was like, I never felt like I could just be like everyone else, which hindsight, I recognize that it is a gift. But back then when you're a kid, you just want to be like everyone else. You want to feel like you associate and you belong. And so that was something that was really hard for me and something that my siblings, not all of them, but some of them couldn't relate to because they didn't necessarily, like I did have 2 other brothers that were also born in Utah, so they could kind of understand. But like, it was something that some of my siblings couldn't relate to me because they kind of were able to create that identity, that Black, if that makes sense, and that a positive feeling towards that. And I think deep down, it was like, it was difficult because it wasn't like people were necessarily racist per se. There was that, but it was more of a prejudice, but they didn't know. Their meaning wasn't like their meaning to be rude about it. They were curious, but not realizing it was doing damage as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And how do you feel like that type of thing does damage? Is there a way to describe? Or?
Yeah, it hurts your core. It's like, I'm trying to think of how, it's like the idea of Tarzan, kind of. I think of Tarzan where it's like, not quite, but I think you kind of get it, where it's like, he's trying so hard to fit in with the other apes, but he's even though we all are all human beings, but it's like,
no matter how hard you just want to be one of everybody else.
Because my physical appearance, I just couldn't. And I think that's the difference between some other things is that physically it's marked, that, I'm different. Like physically people can see from a mile away. But if it's something that's internal, no one really knows that you're quote unquote possibly different unless they talk to you or if you act a certain way, physically. But it's, if that makes sense.
And what makes it even more bizarre or hard is that, like, I'm sure from a white person's point of view, hey, you get a whole month each year to be celebrated, and we're honoring you. And when I show interest, I'm being curious because I care, and I think it's neat and special. That's what that. Right. But you're reacting strongly to that. Tell us what that feels like from you already have, but that's the irony. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it was just frustrating and also, or if some other issues, they'll be like, oh, you already have a month. Like, like, or things, that was another thing too. You have a month, like, it's like, okay. But,
don't complain about other stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You got your own month.
Yeah.
Everything's good.
Yeah, it was just, I think though, as a child, not understanding, it was just very difficult because all I wanted to do is just be like everyone else. Just wanted to, just to fit in. Yeah. Oh man, bring out stuff I forgot.
It brings it up, huh?
Yeah.
And I just have to imagine that's a psychological process that's just always there.
Yeah.
When we exist in the world in a let's just say in a white world as a white person, we don't have to have that constant cognitive process reminding us every day that we're different.
Yeah.
Trying to fit in, feeling like we don't quite. And and I'm sure being LGBT, is something similar. It's just like, I'm different than these people,
Right.
and they always keep calling me out,
Yeah.
and there's nothing and so it's just like it's got to be a mental tax,
For sure.
or a burden that you're always carrying.
For sure. Like, even in the church, people don't recognize even the implication of like white, black, dark, light. Even though it's not necessarily meaning to portray or talk about skin color or identity, there's something deep inside of you that whenever someone says the darkness, that subconsciously you feel like that's you. Because I'm not white. Like, as a child, when they would talk about the curse of Cain, or when they would talk about, priesthood ban, or even the darkening of the skin in the Nephites and stuff, it's like, you can't help but think, well, that means that I'm inherently bad because I'm not light. I'm not white. Even though it's not talking about skin color. But when you read those scriptures and it's talking about the darkness, and they became dark and loath, the dark and loathsome people, whatever, or they became white, and it's just deep down, you can't help but like take that on. At least, and this is my story. I can't speak for every black person that was raised in the church, but for me personally, when I would read the scriptures, I couldn't help. And I didn't realize I was doing this after I got some help with it, but that I was kind of applying that to myself, if that makes sense.
Even if it's subconscious.
Yeah, subconscious. Yeah. It was more like it was brought up later that I did that. I didn't realize that I was doing it at the time when, those words were being said. But that's how people identified me.
Yeah.
You're black,
Yeah.
I'm white.
Lesser.
Yeah.
Because all these messages, and I one of the formative books for me was the autobiography of Malcolm X. I read that when I was at BYU. And it just talks about how much whiteness in our culture is associated with good. God's white. Jesus is white.
Yeah.
Angels are white. Heaven's white.
Yes.
Purity is white.
Yes.
And then dark is scary. Dark is loathsome. Dark is mysterious. Dark is savage. It's native. It's dirty.
Yes.
And those messages, both within Mormonism but in the broader culture, are everywhere.
Yeah.
And so you're again, there's a second process. Not only are you different, but all these negative associations with the color of darkness are constantly bombarding you. And then it's in your scripture.
Yes.
Now, we can get to this later, but because you mentioned it, I wanted to. You said something to the effect of, even though the Book of Mormon isn't referring to skin color when it talks about darkness, I always understood it to mean skin color. For me, that's a modern apologetic changing or, device to try and make the argument that it's not talking about skin color. For my understanding is that for everyone prior to the 90s or 2000s, when that apologetic argument got popularized, it was common knowledge that the Book of Mormon was referring not to a spiritual curse, but to actual skin color. And if you had asked Spencer W. Kimball or Ezra Taft Benson, they all knew that darkness in the Book of Mormon meant skin color. But we've since changed it to mean, no, that's the curse, that's the spiritual curse, not the actual. But I wonder if that's just spin. But it sounds like that's what you were told.
Well, in order for me to make sense of the church and to stay, I had to make it make sense to me. So even though knowing that the apostles had said that, in my mind, it was they're wrong. And if you look at, like, I even would look up the old Bible, like the old dictionary, and what certain words were meaning to help it fit my understanding, if that makes sense. Because to me, I was like, no, they're not talking about skin color, because I had to make it fit. If they were talking about skin color, then it wouldn't work for me. So I was thinking, okay, no, they're talking about spiritual. They're talking about that. That's how I can accept that.
Oh,
That's how I can accept this, is because the scales, they're talking about.
it has to be.
It has to be, because back then they didn't call people black back then. This is a modern thing. And so that's how I was able to make sense of it, because people weren't distinguished by skin color in that time. At least that's what I would tell myself.
Yes.
And so that's how I was able to stay, because I was able to make sense of it. And I would even like stand up in my BYU classes, and I mean, I don't want to go too far into.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just important. I'm coming to understand this a little bit better. Like, many times I've run into Mormons of color who cared less about the skin color thing than I did. And I'm just like, I was bothered by this when I was in 7th grade. Like, why aren't you more bothered than me? But to be a Mormon of color, you can't. It's almost like you have to build walls up around that, even though it's one of the most obvious things to be concerned about. If you're going to survive intellectually, you have to build walls there and kind of not go there.
Yeah. And I mean, even just living in America, we do that all the time. If not even religion, it's like other things too. And so I think it's like, I don't know, I feel like, and I can only speak for myself, I feel like I was kind of used to doing that for other things too. Because, we're used to, we were saying earlier, we're used to seeing a white Jesus Christ. We're used to, even though we don't necessarily agree with it, we're used to it, It's kind of like growing up and through slavery in America, like I feel like there's a lot of things that had to put up with that just were able to, create calluses and be, able to handle that, because, seeing that versus like, being beat is not, which one is worse. Seeing a white Christ is not as, abuse. And so, I feel like
you're always having to just say, this is
like,
this
it's
is
just
good as it
like,
can be.
exactly.
Like,
it's just like, is it worth it? No, like there's other things.
it could be worse. Could be worse.
Yeah, it could be worse. We can handle that, kind of thing.
So let's go back just quickly as you're thinking about being in Utah as a kid and as a teen.
Yeah.
Were there good things about your Mormon associations? Tell me about what you enjoyed about the church, if anything.
Actually,
like primary,
I actually don't really remember too much primary. Well, kind of like, okay. I was actually a very social kid. I was very, like, even thinking of school, like I really loved kids. I was really social, played all the time with people knew me. I don't know. I thrived in school and I think in my wards as well. I was playing outside all the time. And, I even remember like, I would tell my teacher that I'm a princess. I was very much like, kind of at that time I knew I was just very much like that. And then it,
Did your family do like the family prayer scripture study?
Yeah, we did it, but not
evening?
really. I mean, yeah, we did family home evening, but not like typical. You weren't like always on the ball, but we did do that.
Tried to do it.
Yeah, we tried to do it. But my parents are very much, they don't just follow the rules all the time if it doesn't make sense.
Even back then?
Yeah, even back then. Like they were still very Mormon, but they're also like, we're gonna do it this way.
Yeah.
So,
but church every week and that whole
yeah,
deal.
we went to church every week, but besides that, we still kind of, did it our way. I even remember like some of the movies we grew up watching were maybe not like the best, but so they were Mormon, but they weren't like so like very like Molly
And in the home, there wasn't coffee, right?
No, no.
Drugs and alcohol, tobacco.
Okay, definitely not.
All that.
No. We didn't even drink caffeine.
Okay. And do you remember like getting into young women's beehive?
Yeah.
Laurel.
Yeah.
Did you like?
No, I actually hated it.
Okay, talk about that.
So what?
Girls camp, all that stuff.
Yeah, I really struggled with it because I felt how I just at a young age I recognized how hypocritical it was. It was frustrating, so what I mean is a lot of the kids would they would, like the girls in our Laurels, whatever, they'd be so sweet to me at church, but then at school they'd act like they didn't know me. Some of these girls. And I thought, wait, you're saying this at church, but then when you're in real life, you're not actually doing it. And I recognized that, and I absolutely hated it because I feel like I really love people, and I love to get to know people. And so there were just some girls that were kind of catty, and I wasn't like that. And it was frustrating because they would be like, oh yeah, we're friends. And then at school, it was like, no, not really. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, it was like, they're nice, but like, kind of like the two-faced nice. It's like,
was it just mean girl stuff? Was it
no,
just
not
normal?
really. I just feel like I could sense this idea of I'm going to be nice to you, but I don't want to be nice to you. And I feel like even in the church, it happens a lot where people are nice because they feel like they're supposed to be nice, even if they don't want to be nice or they don't want to like that person. But I'm supposed to like that person because, Christ told me to. So I'm going to be nice to that person, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I recognized that, and it just really bugged me, and I just didn't like it. I mean, I had friends, but I just felt there was just a lot of that going on, and I just didn't like it.
And then there's kind of a two-part question that comes out of that. I think it's natural for me to ask, was any part of that because you were a person of color? And then the second part is, this is part of what it's like to be a person of color in Utah as a kid growing up, because whether or not it is because you're a person of color, your brain's going to always be wondering.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like either way, there's an impact. So tell me about, I don't want to project, but did you wonder that?
Well, at that time I didn't necessarily.
Okay.
I didn't. It wasn't until I went to BYU and, high school that I really was starting to notice those things. But at that time, I didn't necessarily equate it to that. I was still, trying to hold the idea that wasn't happening. I was,
not Mormonism, not.
Exactly. I was still trying to hold on to that. And, I do admit, there were some things I remember, when I would read the scriptures in the class, I wouldn't even say hell if it said it in the Bible. Read this verse, and if it had hell or ass or, for the donkey, I wouldn't read it because I'm swearing. And I think some people thought I was weird because instead I would say blank. And I remember the memory when I did that, and my teacher thought it was so weird that I wouldn't read it. But I was so trying so hard to, be good, not knowing that I can read the scripture. If it says hell, I can say hell. Sorry, I totally forgot your question.
No, it's okay. So what things did you, as you're developing into high school, what were your talents or interests?
Yeah, I've always been into art. I've drawn ever since I was a little girl. I was always kind of I got awards. My teacher, there was reflections. If anyone's from Utah, you would know what that is. I won the reflection.
Yeah, that's an art. That's poetry, writing, art contest.
I won
that the high schools run.
Yeah,
and the kids compete, and then you get an award, best drawing, best painting.
In junior high, I won one of those, and I was also on the track team because my dad was in track. So I've done track ever since I was 9. So I did track.
Which distance?
I did 100-meter, and then at the time too, when you're young, you could do the 50-meter dash. And then I did long jump as well.
And was there, I can only imagine there was weirdness around, you're a person of color and you're an athlete.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I have to tell you this story. So I was in my sophomore year of high school. They were trying to get me on the basketball team. I'm bad at basketball, but they were trying to get me on the team because they thought I was going to be good, and I was not good.
Because all black
And they
people can
learned
play basketball.
exactly, and they learned that I was not that good, and that was the end of that story.
Pull the mic forward just a
Yeah.
little bit.
Oh,
Pull
yeah.
the mic, or so either.
Yeah, for sure. So that was the end of that story.
Yeah,
Like, oh,
and they're just thinking, oh, black people are great at basketball.
yeah, because like there were literally, it was me in junior and high. There was like me and then these two other black kids, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
3, my whole high school. So they're like, oh, she's gonna be good. No,
And then like, oh, okay.
oh, she's a human that not all humans are good at this. Oh,
Okay, so you were in track. You like to draw.
I was always drew. I was
And you left Utah by your junior year.
my junior year.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what caused you to leave Utah?
Yeah, so okay.
Unless there's other stories you want to tell.
Let's go back for a minute.
Okay, tell us where you want to go.
Yeah, so let's start when my parents split.
Okay.
Because that's kind of where a lot of things changed. So my parents split, and that was like, there were a lot of other things. It's not my story to tell, so I'm not going to bring up everything. But my parents split, and my dad left the church.
What grade were you?
I was 9.
You were 9.
Yeah.
And your dad left the church.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything you know about why he left the church?
Now I do.
Okay.
But at the time, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't know. I almost thought it was my fault, even with my parents splitting. It was difficult. And so, my parents split. And so my dad remarried, moved to Salt Lake. And then we were in Lindon. And my mom went back to UVU or UVSC at the time and went to go get her degree so she could provide for us. Well, my dad would pay child support. And then, So
And what was that like to have your family get divorced when you're 9?
That changed everything, really. It was like we went from being this revered, family, people knew who we were, to, oh, your parents are divorced? Oh my gosh, like talk of the town, the black family, I can only imagine. That's kind of what I
it's lots of white families get divorced, and they're just like, we got divorced.
Right. But that was
the black family that got divorced.
Exactly.
In Utah,
yeah,
right?
like we were. Yeah, so like there was a lot of things that happened. My siblings were all pretty. They all were like active. We all went, and then after the divorce, they all kind of started to fall away, and it was really hard. It was difficult.
I can only imagine that if you're like get photo ops with the church and like in the manuals and the cover of the ensign or whatever.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, your family's not special anymore because you didn't live up to the model.
Right.
You kind of fall in status from like the special, unique ones that we want to take photos of whenever we can to like, oh, no, there they go. It's that divorced black family. That would be really hard to stay in the church falling from a pedestal.
Yeah.
Is that
And as far as I knew, that was our status. My parents might have thought different. Maybe we weren't like necessarily revered as this, amazing family. But that was my perspective as a child and as a little kid. That's like, oh, we get to do this. Maybe, like knowing my parents, they probably would have been like, no, it wasn't really that great. But that was my my assumption. And so it was hard. And I think the hardest thing. So there's a lot of crazy things that happened. So after that, I actually, and I think it was because of stress and everything that was happening with the divorce, I actually had seizures. And then I had a brain tumor. And so that was like a crazy thing that happened.
So at what age?
When I was 9. So shortly after all that went down.
Was that just a coincidence, or do you actually think
I feel like
stress?
I feel like there's stress, and I'll explain too that there was also some trauma that I went through that I feel like that equated to that as well. But I mean, that's as far as I know. I mean, because I was a pretty healthy kid, so it kind of came out of left field, and it's not really, in a family or anything. But that changed a lot of things for me. So that happened. Luckily, it was, is it benign, right? It was benign.
It wasn't malignant.
No.
It was benign. So
it was benign.
non-cancerous.
Yeah, non-cancerous.
So you're 9 or 10 when this brain tumor.
Yes.
So do you had surgery?
It was too close to, I can't even remember, but I remember them saying, my memory. My memory is really, I struggle with my memory. So sometimes I forget words. So it's because of that. So it was too close to something, and so they couldn't operate on. And so I remember I took Lamictal to keep the seizures down, because I would have like petit mal seizures. I still do occasionally, but I can handle them. But that was like a huge thing, because when it did happen, I remember I was in the hospital, and this is before, like at the time it was the size of like a quarter. And when I was in the hospital, missionaries came and they gave me a blessing. And, I remember just feeling at peace that everything was going to be okay. It gave me a blessing. And a couple months, or like 6 months later, it went down in size. And so I equated that to the missionaries coming and me praying. And it was, and that was kind of the start of like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, so the people and the gospel are separate. So if I can separate them, I can still enjoy being a member of the church if I recognize that the gospel's perfect, but people aren't perfect. Okay, I can do this.
Right.
And so I kind of just became very much like, okay, I'm gonna be, Molly Mormon. I'm gonna really, really try. And at that point, I was becoming very like into the church, and my siblings were all starting to leave the church for reasons.
And your dad had left.
And my dad had left.
Yeah.
I mean, and they were talking about, the church is racist. And I was like, no, and, because of the curse of Cain, but it's like, no, what I told you of how I explained it, that's how I was able to stay. And I was like, no, this is what it means, and then.
What made the tumor shrink? Was it medicine?
Idea.
Were you taking medicine?
No, I don't know.
How can they just say you have a tumor, but we're not going to operate?
I don't know. I can't. If you talk to my mom, it was a miracle. It just.
And you believed that for a long time, and maybe it was a miracle.
Yeah.
But you're saying the tumor went away.
Yeah.
And it went away after the elders gave you a blessing. Well,
not exactly after, but it. For one, it wasn't growing, and then years later, this is like not within months, but years later, that's when it was like I had a. What is it called? Oh my goodness. When you go underneath the thing. And
like an MRI?
Yeah, I had an MRI. And that's when it had gone down in size. Because I didn't get any, chemotherapy or anything.
Huh. So it's just and that's one of the hard things is, fine, if people want to believe that elders give blessings and it heals people, or the priesthood works, that's fine. We're not telling people not to believe that.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at it scientifically, tumors can grow, they can shrink, they can stay the same.
Exactly.
And a blessing happens, and kind of the way it works in Mormonism is, if a good thing happens after a blessing, then it's because the priesthood's real and the power is real, and it's a miracle.
Yeah.
If you don't get the desired result, then you always code it as, well, it was God's will, or the people weren't worthy enough. And so either way, it's at minimum neutral to the church. It's either a neutral or a positive to how people interpret it. But the truth is, do we know if the elders made the tumor shrink? We don't know.
Yeah.
And so, but that's, for you and your mom, it was a miracle.
Yeah, exactly. Like I still had seizures, but the tumor thing was.
Yeah. And that's great. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're glad too.
Yeah, for sure. But it was interesting though. I remember going there and I'd be like, I don't know how to say this without it seeming kind of weird. But I just thinking, you know what? If it was my time, I could go. I remember just being like, I don't know if that sounds weird.
Celestial kingdom.
I just was like, okay. And I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just thinking, I don't know. It was weird. But I just was thinking, I was feeling at peace. I was like, okay. I could do this if I had to go.
I'll go.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So those experiences made you want to be a Molly Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
You were going to be the righteous one in your family. You were Nephi.
Yes, I definitely identified with Nephi. Yes.
And your siblings were Laman and Lemuel. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, my older brother, who I was closest to, he's 2 years older than me, he was really popular in school. And so everyone knew him. And this older man recruited him and some other kids to steal and rob this store. And that happened. He was 17.
And again, when a white kid in Utah steals, it's just a kid in trouble. When a black kid in Utah steals, there's black people again doing whatever they do.
Yes. And that basically, after that, he was in jail, and he's still been in and out of jail since. He's he's a follower. My brother really was.
And when a sibling, this happened for me, when older siblings get into trouble, sometimes that can make you just even more
That's exactly what happened.
Desirous to be righteous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. Yep. So, that happened. And it was really interesting to see how my neighborhood in Wardwood was reacting towards that. I felt like I thought we would have more support, but it was almost like everyone was talking about us. Like, of course that would happen to them. Of course. Black kid? Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. We were, for a lot of people, we were the first black people that they have ever met. And so with what's on the TV, those rappers,
or like the cop shows.
Yeah, the cop shows, of course.
Yeah, that's what black people do. They steal and
of course that would happen.
Get divorced and they have broken families and single moms and all the stereotypes.
For sure. And I don't want to speak for everyone because I'm sure there are some people who didn't feel that way, but that's also what I was projecting too. I was also feeling that's how people were, and so that was my world. And so I saw that. That was my idea of what was going on as well. And after all of this stuff was happening, I became extremely shy and extremely didn't want to, I didn't feel safe. I didn't want to go out, because, it was interesting. Like, some people don't realize, like, even going to the store and just, innocent, obviously, but to have a little child stare at you like they've never seen you, like you're an alien, and what that does to you, It's like, mommy, there's, and it's like, whoa, like to have that happen, not just once, but a lot, and
you hear those stories of like, mommy, that this person has dirt on his face.
Yeah,
They're like really offensive.
Yeah.
But it's just because they've never seen
exactly.
it.
Or mommy's a black person.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I am black. But then it's like, oh yeah, okay. Constant reminder, I'm different, constant,
And when you're a teen, it's just hard enough to be a teen.
Yeah, I'm going through like puberty, I'm already like feeling awkward. And like to add that in the mix, even more awkward.
Yeah, super hard.
Yeah, and, I felt
so you go shy, you went internal.
Yeah, I went very shy, extremely.
And that's lonely and kind of sad because you were such a vivacious,
child,
outgoing child.
For sure.
So that's a shift for you that must have been hard emotionally.
Yeah, and I was very grateful because I had two other best friends who were also black, and their families were also very Mormon at the time. And so,
where'd you find them? You were in Lindon?
Well, when you find if you see another black person, you're like, like, we're going to be friends. When it's that time, my parents knew them, and so I've known her since I was a baby, my best friend. And then I met another best friend. They came from Uganda, and my family helped them find a place to live. And then I became best friends with their daughter.
So they weren't in your stake or high school.
No,
but they were
They lived in Provo, but
okay.
Yeah. So we would always get together. Yeah, so I had that. I'm really grateful I had a friend. And she was also kind of shy too. But, thinking back, we were, like now when we kind of find our own, that was kind of learned. It was kind of like, it was almost like culturally, that's kind of where we were pushed to be, if that makes sense. Because we just really wanted to fit in, So
I don't know how to articulate this, but that says a lot because there are a billion ways people can be similar or make connections.
Yeah. Yes.
The fact that there's something stark about the fact that your family had to find a black family or two
Yeah.
to want to become friends with.
Yeah.
It shows how you felt in the broader culture.
Yeah.
It's like I won't really find
Yeah.
comfort
Yeah.
or connection
Yes.
unless I find someone of the same skin color. And
Yeah.
that's just an evidence of like how uncomfortable it must have
It
been
really was.
for you to be living in a white culture.
Yeah, because like when I had crushes on boys, or like, yeah, it was hard because like, I felt like some of them would never, it was like, oh,
Would
you're
never
black.
what?
Well, like me, or be willing to, like, because I was the black girl, or it just like, I can tell you, even when I was in dating age, like it was actually, it was easier in high school, but in college it was a little bit harder, because I feel like when we were younger, like people were more, not as conditioned, and and so it was a little bit, but at the same time it still was difficult to not feel like the token black friend, or to other people. And but again, this is probably my perception, because I'm sure I had friends that really genuinely liked me, but when you were growing up, it's just hard not to know if people are intrigued by you because of your skin color, because they really like you. If that makes sense.
Yeah, is it my charm? Is it my wit? Is
Yeah.
it my intellect?
Or
is it my
because I'm
creativity?
different?
Or is it my color?
Yeah, and you're just curious, or or you want to,
Yeah.
like I remember when I was like, and this is kind of going a little far, but when I was at BYU, and if somebody was walking on that same sidewalk as me, and if they ever were to walk off the sidewalk, I always wondered, I was like, is it because I'm black, or is it just you're shy, or you just don't want to talk to people in general? And I always had to like kind of.
Yeah, it's always in your mind.
Yeah, it's just in my mind.
Yeah. Okay, so your mom remarried.
Yes.
And eventually they leave. Anything else you want to share about being in Utah before moving away?
Well, I think no. I think that's good. Yeah. So yeah, my mom remarries, and at this time I was just really, I'll just say I was going through, I think, a lot of depression and struggling, even with my mom remarrying, and not realizing what I was going through, and just thinking, oh, I'm just like this weird kid, very emotional, very struggling.
You were kind of depressed.
Yeah, and there's other reasons I'll bring up later why that is, but.
So you mentioned in your outline that you had a brother called as bishop at 27.
Yeah.
Was that during this time?
Yeah, but he lived in, where did he live?
So one of
Boston.
your siblings stayed in the church.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was in Boston.
Yeah.
And he gets called as a bishop at
Yep.
27.
At 27.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what was that? Were you special? Were you connected
Oh, yeah.
to him in a special way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Like
because
the
I feel like
two-
I could relate to him. I mean, and granted, my siblings, some of them were still kind of in the church, but they were just kind of also doing their own thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally could relate to him. I even, and I hate to say this, because now where I'm at now with my father is so great, but I saw him as a father figure, if that makes sense.
Because your father was downgraded in your eyes because you were assessing him from a gospel perspective.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
When kids downgrade their
Yep.
parents
Yep.
because they're judging them by the church yardstick.
Yeah. And that's what I was told. So I was.
I'm so sorry for you and your dad.
Yeah. I'm grateful we're like, yeah.
Better now, but
Yeah.
So your brother becomes your surrogate spiritual dad.
Yes.
That's great and awful.
Yeah.
So okay.
Yeah.
Heavy stuff. Okay. Yeah, and plus your dad's an apostate. So not only, they're divorced, but he's okay, we'll get there. So your family moves. You move.
Yeah.
Your mother gets remarried.
We married. He's from Georgia. We moved to Georgia.
How'd you meet him?
I think online. Because he's black. So it's like, you don't really find a lot of those. We were also like LDS.
He was Mormon?
Yeah.
But
he
from
was
Georgia.
Mormon,
Okay.
From Georgia.
Okay.
Because he moved into their house in Lindon, and then they decided that we were going to move to Georgia. And then before we moved, they got divorced. So then it was just...
Oh, this was a short marriage.
Yeah, it was a short marriage. So my siblings moved with my dad. And then I was the only one that moved with my mom.
Okay. And that's in Washington?
Moved to Georgia.
No, but
Oh yeah, they moved to my dad in Washington. Yes.
okay. Okay. So you're with your mom, but eventually you end up with your dad. So
Yes.
what else happens? So
In Georgia. So yeah, we moved to Georgia, and just I was leaving the bubble. That was hard for me.
were you excited? It's like, get out of Utah.
No,
Woohoo.
I wasn't, because even though, like, at that time, I didn't realize what was going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I
sure.
didn't realize I was depressed. I didn't realize that this was wrong and weird. It was all I've ever known.
Yeah.
I was trying to be Molly Mormon, leaving this Molly Mormon safe bubble and going to Georgia. And mind you, we lived in Alpharetta, Georgia, or Gainesville, actually, on Plantation Bend Trail. I will never forget my address. And I was still...
Talk about what that means, because I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, it just was like, oh, okay. It was interesting because I realized that we were moving to Georgia, but we were moving to the white part of Georgia. And some people don't know what that means. So I was still one of like 3 other black kids at my school.
In Georgia.
Yes, in Georgia.
Because segregation,
Yes.
cultural segregation is
Yes.
still alive
Yes. Yeah.
in the South.
Yeah, like a sign that said, like, blacks aren't allowed here, like, not too long ago was, like, taken down from that area. But my mom, she was very much of a strong woman. And she really wanted to, like, we're going to be, we can do this. Yeah, we're going to help these people, kind of like, we got this, kind of thing. And then I forgot to mention, like, even in the church, she was very much like, when people would be like, when people would come over and do their visiting teaching, and they would say, like, they'd say things like other churches are the church of the devil. My mom would be like, no, that's not true. She's very, so like so that's her personality type. So we moved there, and I was a minority, and it was different this time because there's a difference between being prejudiced and just not, what's the word? Not knowing. What's the word? There's a word. I can't think of it. Ignorant. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between ignorant and being, prejudiced than being flat out racist. Mm-hmm. And I had my first racist experience.
Like overt.
Oh, yeah.
Overt racism.
Overt racism.
Like what kind of stuff, if you're comfortable sharing?
I'm comfortable because it shocked me to my core. I remember I was walking.
So the whole time you were in Utah, you never were called the N-word
No.
or just like overt?
No, it was more like people would be like, oh, your hair is so pretty, but you should braid it.
And those are called micro. I'm not an expert on race stuff, but when I took in my PhD, when I took kind of a diversity class, multicultural class, there's microaggressions, and microaggressions are like, oh, let me touch your hair.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, you're so exotic looking, or any comment you can make.
You look like Oprah. No, I don't.
Right. You're a good basketball player. Yeah, exactly. Like all those things, those assumptions that feel innocent, that are probably said with okay intent, but they're received as at a minimum, you're different.
Yes.
And at a maximum, in some way, they're offensive.
Yes.
But they're not intended.
Yes.
Then there's kind of the overt stuff. And you're saying the overt stuff you never received in Utah.
I never.
But then you're in freaking Georgia with a bunch of white people in Confederate sort of like Reconstructionist South.
Yes.
Confederate flags everywhere. Oh. And it's called Plantation Road. I cannot imagine.
Plantation Bend Trail. I was like, Mom, we're moving here? She's like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so some of the racist things you experienced there were like what?
I remember I was walking in the hallway, and these 2 white boys come on my side, and they start walking with me, and they called me the N-word, and they were just surrounding me.
Right to you? Right
to me in the middle of the hallway.
Fix the mic so that it goes right. No, it's okay. Yeah. So like they say that to you?
Yeah, and everyone else is in the hallway. We weren't the only ones.
Circling around you?
Yeah. And I was shocked. Yeah. I've never experienced it, so I was just like, what the heck?
And you're like a junior in high school?
Yeah, I was a junior in high school, and I just was like, what is this? And I remember I told the principal, and she basically was like, oh, I'm sorry, sweetie, but do you want a sucker? It was very much like, I'm sorry, but...
And you're like adjusting to a new state. You've left your home. Like you've got to be feeling overwhelmed.
I was learning a lot.
Yeah.
I was learning a lot. I remember too, my mom, we got me a car so I wouldn't have to be in the bus because kids were saying profanities. And so I was very much like, I don't want to hear swear words, like what is, like, what is that word? I've never heard that word before. Kids talking about stuff I just never experienced. And I even went to Mormon prom. We didn't even go to the real prom. We had Mormon prom because real prom was like, you want to go there. So yeah.
So a couple things. So was the church kind of the safe haven for you in Georgia?
It was, because it was what I knew. I mean, I'm from Utah, and here I am, it was a safe place for me. Like, because it wasn't really safe at school. I didn't feel like, it wasn't, that was not like that happened every day, but I definitely.
It only has to happen once for you to feel terrified, I would guess.
Well, I was, luckily, like I said, because of my mom being so strong, I wasn't necessarily terrified, because I do have some fire in me. And so if I would have, I just was so shocked that I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
But it just made me be like, oh, okay, this is weird. Okay, I'm just learning. I was just learning a lot.
Yeah.
And I would go to my brother's, because he lived in Georgia after that, and I would drive he lived in Alpharetta, and I would drive over there and hang out a lot with him. And actually, him and his family was a safe haven. His wife at the time, they're not married anymore, but she was Haitian, and so there's this, Haitian family. Her mom lived there too, near my brother, and so there's this black, family that's also LDS. So I had refuge there a lot. And at the time, my mom was kind of not as active. And so I would go to church on my own. I would sit by myself at church.
In high school?
Yeah, in high school. I would even go early to my classes and sit on the floor and wait till classes start.
What was that about? What was that about?
Just, when was that, or what was it like?
What was that about for you? Why were you?
I just didn't feel safe, if that makes sense. I did have friends, but I just wanted to get through school and,
But getting to class early, is that just because you're trying to be good? You're trying to be excellent?
No, I just was trying to find a safe place.
Oh, you'd go early.
Yeah. I would even eat lunch with my teacher sometimes instead of going to the cafeteria. That makes sense. It didn't happen all the time, but I slowly found friends, and it changed. But in the beginning.
Did you make friends in the ward?
Yes.
And leaders? Did you feel... You had a good ward experience.
Yeah, I did have a pretty good ward experience, but again, there was only 6 kids that were LDS.
Not a big youth.
And they weren't all going to the same school. I had only one girl from my ward that went to my same school, and we became friends.
But not a huge, bubbling, vibrant youth program.
No.
Okay.
I did go to seminary in the morning at 6 in the morning, and so I had that experience. But a lot of these kids weren't even really active themselves. They were, in my opinion, as being a Molly, they weren't always they were more cooler, and they would do, be more experimental. And I was more very and I had one other friend girl that was like that went to my school. And so we just hung out. So
I'm just curious, did you ever bump into a person of color who was in Georgia, who had been raised in the South, and they're trying to make sense of you because you talk differently?
Oh, yeah.
What was that like? You may have talked or acted differently than they would have expected you to based on your color.
Yeah.
And so that's a different form of, I don't want to say racism, but it's not racism, but
but
it's something. What was that?
It was interesting. Because I was thinking, I was like, okay, I get to relate to these people, and they'd be like, why are you talking, why do you talk like that, And
these are black people.
Yeah.
Basically thinking you're talking very white.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not used to seeing people look like them.
Yeah.
Quote.
Yes.
That are talking like.
Yes. Basically I wasn't black enough.
Yeah. And how awful is that? You finally are around more of your people, quote unquote.
Right.
And you're not feeling at home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to project.
No, but I know what you mean. No, yeah.
Is that how you felt?
Yeah.
I can't be at home anywhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because I was thinking I can relate, but it's no, I still can't. And even when I was at BYU and that's another story, but it relates to this, is I had roommates that were African. And
Right.
I still didn't fit in. I wasn't African. I had an African friend tell me, Marlena, you're not African American. I'm African American. Like, oh, what? You know?
Yeah. You can't even be African American.
Yeah. I'm like, you're a good point. But anytime that I say I'm American, people are always like, no, you're African American. You know, like, Marlena, you're African American. I'm American. You know.
And I remember this when Obama was elected president, there was this joke on the Colbert Report where an academic's basically saying he's not really our first African American president because he's not really African American.
Right.
And Colbert's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, he was raised in Hawaii by a white mom. And that's very different than what the average person in Alabama, person of color in Alabama experiences. It's not the same.
But
But for me, there's a larger thread that I'm picking up on that I just want to see if this is right. And that's just one of identity. Like even though I grew up in Houston, in a Baptist town, I grew up as a Mormon and I knew who I was. I'm just like, I'm a Mormon.
Yeah.
I'm a white, straight Mormon male athlete, and I know who I am.
Yeah.
I'm Saturday's warrior. I'm a part of these chosen people. I'm tribe of whatever, my patriarchal blessing, and I'm just I know who I am.
Right.
I never and I belonged. I belonged because I belonged in my ward. I belonged in my stake. I belonged in my church. And I just, so regardless of being different and sometimes being excluded, or even there was prejudice against Mormons, I always knew who I was and felt like I was part of not just something in my family, not just something in my ward, not just in my stake, not just in my city, but I'm part of a global family that I'm a part of.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't think that's your experience.
No.
Your experience is something else.
Yeah. And then,
Which is like, who the freak?
what am I? Like, what? Yeah, exactly.
And I think we don't think about the luxury or the privilege of having this secure identity that we never have to question. There's never a process in the back of my mind about, do I fit in? We just always fit in. I don't know. I don't want to make a big deal about that. But
no, it is. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did high school finish up? Any big stories there or things you want to say?
So after my junior year, I decided to move to Washington with my dad.
Just because why?
Well, for one, I hated it there.
Because
and two, I wanted to connect with him. I wanted to connect with my dad.
But you hated what about
Georgia? I hated it. I just didn't like what we were just talking about. I just felt like I couldn't fit in. I just didn't have the friends that I really wanted. It just wasn't a place that I liked. I think I would have enjoyed it more had I maybe gone to a middle ground, instead of just going from like Utah to Georgia, which are kind of like opposites in my mind. It just was like, even though I was still a minority, it was just, it was very uncomfortable for me. And I really love people, and I just couldn't find that community. And I kind of did, but I kind of didn't. And I wanted, to feel like I could belong somewhere, and I just didn't feel like I belonged there. And so I realized that I really wanted to connect my dad, And my mom and I, we were so close, but we were also starting to get on each other's nerves too. And so I just kind of wanted, I was a teenager, so I kind of wanted to get some air and, get to know my dad more, I was craving that. So